Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be retiring because now I'll finally be able to tell people what I think. Let me thank all of you for being here. It's important that we organize and deal with the realities of this next election. Thank Ed Garvey, thank Dave Zwiefel, thank John Nichols, thank all of the people who have helped to put this operation together. It is true that Ed Garvey was a Republican back when we were in college together, but he was a Rockefeller Republican, so it wasn't all that bad. But I'm glad we're all on the same side. I think we always have been. This is a very strange day in American history, because as you know, 9 years ago, a date that, to borrow a phrase from FDR, a date that will live in infamy, the U.S. was viciously attacked by zealots from abroad whose actions severely wounded this country and affected the future of this society in a profound way. The impact on society was dramatic, and it was fully visible and blatant. I don't think there was any action in history that parallels it as far as the United States is concerned in terms of the impact on this country, except perhaps Pearl Harbor. But there is another attack on working families of this country that is being carried out day after day after day, not so visibly, by stealth, and not by enemies from abroad. Instead, that attack on the economic interests of average working families has been orchestrated by some of the wealthiest and most well-connected families in America. And it is that attack that I want to talk about today. Before I do that, I want to describe the context in which we will be making policy decisions and political decisions over the next 4 or 5 months. And when we think about this economy, I think we need to remember where we are and how we got here. Because since 1980, we have experienced the biggest ripoff of the middle class by the economic elite of this country in the history of the universe. From 1946 through roughly 1978, incomes in this country rose for all families, whether you were in the poorest 20% or the richest 20% or in between. Your income in real terms rose by roughly the same rate. And we had, in essence, a golden age of equity and fairness and prosperity in this country. But since Ronald Reagan's era, we have had the biggest transfer of income up the income scale in the history of the country. And that culminated in 6 straight years under George Bush, in which the top 10% of earners in this society raked in over 90% of all of the income growth in the country, and the other 90% were left to grab table scraps. And that means that the concentration of wealth in the hands of the economic elite is now the worst since statistics have been kept. From 1929 to 1946, we had a series of government actions under FDR and under Harry Truman that helped make this an equitable society. We had Wall Street reform, we had progressive taxation, we had the GI Bill of Rights, we had Social Security, we had the minimum wage, We had the Wagner Act that helped labor unions organize, and that spread prosperity all across society. All across society, regardless of income. But there is now a concentration of wealth and income in this country that is every bit as bad as it was in 1929. And that reversal has been sought and promoted and achieved by a clandestine network of collusion between some of the richest families in America, and their efforts have been masked by a thin veneer and a false facade of phony think tanks masquerading as economic analysts when they are really political protagonists. And they are working in the service of the Koch brothers, the Bradley Foundation, the Olin family, the Scafee family, the Kohler family, the Coors family, and other economic royalists who think they have a right to dominate the economy of this country. And what wonders have they produced? Well, they were the political godfather of the Bush policies that obliterated 3 straight years of Clinton budget surpluses. They paid for 2 huge tax cuts, primarily aimed at the wealthy, with what? With borrowed money. They paid for their prescription drug bill. With what? With borrowed money. They paid for 2 wars. With what? With borrowed money. And they also engaged in a decade-long deregulation of Wall Street that turned Wall Street banks into casinos. Then the economy collapsed. Credit markets collapsed all over the world, and 750,000 people were losing their jobs each and every month in the last 3 months of the Bush administration. That is the mess that Barack Obama inherited when he walked into office a little over 2 years ago. And because of that, over the next decade, we will pay $10 trillion in interest payments because of those mistakes. And now the same crowd that drove us into the ditch are second-guessing Obama's efforts to get it out of the ditch, and they are attacking us because we have tried to spend about 1/10 the amount that they blew to try to get this country back to work. So they're attacking us as being socialists. They're attacking us as being socialists because we did such outrageously Marxist things as extending unemployment insurance, by providing health coverage for people under COBRA if they lost their job, by providing jobs for construction workers because of a $90 billion investment in infrastructure, by keeping kids healthy, by keeping them on Badger care and on Medicaid. And now they're also trying an old prescription. They're also now trying to resurrect the Bush effort to privatize Social Security and voucherize Medicare. And their package would gut support for education and science and health, and it would blow another hole in the deficit by extending for 2 more years $100,000 tax cuts on average for millionaires at a cost of some $760 billion being added to the deficit. They want to tie down, they want to lock in the results of the inequitable economic policies that have been followed over the last 30 years. And they are moving heaven and earth to get that done. You will remember a decade ago, Newt Gingrich tried to shut down the government in order to force Bill Clinton to shred Medicare. And you will remember that he demanded that Clinton cave in to his agenda to allow Medicare to wither on the vine. Well, today that agenda is being regurgitated, and it's being designed by a politician from Wisconsin, Congressman Ryan from the 1st Congressional District. The Ryan Blueprint is a monument to inequity and injustice. It is totally at odds with Wisconsin's enlightened progressive tradition. You all know that Bob La Follette at the turn of the last century ripped the power levers of government away from the economic elite in this state, and through a series of policies tried to give government back to average people. La Follette fought for progressive tax policy that put working people ahead of corporate elites. Ryan would reverse that. Ryan would shred what is left of tax fairness and progressive taxation based on ability to pay. He would eliminate taxes on corporations, and he would substitute an 8.5% national sales tax and shift the burden, therefore, from corporate America to average working people. He would cut the effective tax rate of the wealthiest top of the wealthiest 1/10 of 1% of all Americans. He would cut their effective tax rate by 2/3. He would support giving tax credits averaging $100,000 to millionaires, adding almost $700 billion to the deficit. And after giving millionaires that huge tax cut over the next decade, he would then decide that we cannot afford to spend what we're spending today on education and science and health care. And so he would freeze all domestic appropriations for 10 straight years. That effectively would gut virtually every social program that we have put on the books by way of appropriations since LBJ was president. It would mean, for instance, you would have that our Pell Grants that help working kids go to college would be cut in their effective purchasing power by about 1/3. It would mean that transportation and science and medical research would be cut by 1/3. He would undercut the concept of an earned guaranteed benefit under Social Security by promoting the privatization of Social Security. He would do that by allowing workers to set up investments in the stock market, not as an addition to their basic guaranteed benefit, but as a substitute. That is the first step in the road to destroying Social Security, and they know it even though they won't publicly admit it. He would destroy Medicare as we know it. Under the Ryan plan, he would eventually shrink the value of Medicare coverage by 75%. By 75%. And he's being aided and abetted by other Republican candidates in this state, including Sean Duffy, one of the Republican candidates in the race to succeed me, who describes the Ryan plan as a good starting point. Well, the fact is, it is far from a good starting point. It is a disastrous starting point. It would turn Medicare over to the insurance industry lock, stock, and barrel, and put corporate America back in charge of the whole operation. I don't think that's the way average Badgers want to go. So the great issue of this campaign is whether or not working people and their allies in the society will recognize in time the danger that confronts us all. The danger is that progressive forces, and you can hear it every day on talk radio from Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh, the danger is that progressive forces will allow their unhappiness with the economy and with the Washington situation to keep them away from the polls, thus effectively handing the next decade over to the architects of the Bush policies, and we cannot let that happen. I know that a lot of you are frustrated and fed up by how hard it is for us to get a lot of blue dog Democrats from Republican leading districts to vote for the kind of progressive legislation that we believe in. Well, let me tell you, if you're frustrated by it, you're not nearly as frustrated as I am, because I have to work with them every day. But we cannot let our desire for the perfect be the enemy of the achievable, because the end result would be disaster. And I want to give you one example. I know a lot of you, like me, wanted single-payer health care. And I know a lot of you, like me, wanted a public option when we passed the bill. But I want to tell you a story. From 1930 to 1938, my congressional district was represented by a man by the name of Jerry Boileau. Boileau was the second last progressive La Follette Republican to represent Wisconsin in the United States House of Representatives. The last was Barney Gehrman from Ashland. And Boileau, when Fiorello LaGuardia left the House to become mayor of New York, Boileau succeeded him as the spokesman for the progressive Republicans in the House. And in 1938, he got beat. He served for 8 years, from 30 to 38. My dad ran a supper club, a watering hole, or a bar, if you want to call it that, and I worked in it when I was in the legislature on weekends. Boileau had come back to Wausau and had become a local judge. And he was highly respected. He walked into our place one day, and I bought him a martini. And then I bought him another one, and I started talking with him. And I said, Jerry, tell me, what beat you in 1938? He said, senior citizens beat me because I voted for Social Security. I said, what on earth are you talking about? That makes no sense whatsoever. He said, look, today seniors would kill you if you tried to kill Social Security, but in those days, in my district, it was very different. Because he said, in my district, the senior citizens wanted something else. They wanted what was known as the Townsend Plan, named after Doc Townsend from California, who wanted a simple I forget if it was $100 or $200 grant per person to go to each senior citizen. It was in essence a welfare program. And Boileau said FDR understood that we had to have a contributory program that produced an earned benefit, or else the public would never support it over the long haul, because the public doesn't like welfare. And so he said, I worked very hard for Social Security. And as a result, old man Townsend came into my district, organized a lot of Townsend clubs, and they beat me in 1938. Now, what's the moral of that story? The moral is that today, we cannot possibly imagine this society without Social Security. And yet, at the time that Boileau was in Congress, those fights about the little details were very important to people. And yet today we look back and say, what was that all about? I mean, we cannot imagine this program or this country without the program. And I will tell you, the same thing will happen with the health care bill that we passed if we can keep progressive forces in control of the Congress. And we will look back a generation from now. And when somebody tells us that idiots like Rush Limbaugh are saying that this is a government takeover, when they tell us that idiots like Glenn Beck are telling us that this gives up America's freedom, they will look back and say, what in hell were they talking about? And so I tell you that story about Jerry Boileau to illustrate that you have to grab what you can grab in each session of Congress, move on, regroup, and move on to the next effort. Social Security has been augmented many times since it passed, and so has Medicare. And so will this health program if we do not allow the Republicans to take control of the Congress and kill it in the crib. That's so I want to warn you, in spite of all of our frustration and dissatisfaction, we have an enormous amount at stake in this election. There is a huge difference between what the Democrats in the House will deliver and what the Republicans in the House will deliver. In terms of decency, in terms of progressive legislation, in terms of giving a damn about average people, there is one whale of a difference between John Boehner and Nancy Pelosi, and don't you forget it. And we don't have the luxury of fighting among ourselves. I want to quote something that Bob La Follette wrote in his autobiography. He talked about hearing a speech that the Chief Justice of Wisconsin, Edward G. Ryan, made to the graduating class at Madison in June of 1883, just before La Follette entered the university. And La Follette said, here's what Ryan said: "There is looming up a new and dark power. The enterprises of the country are aggregating vast corporate combinations of unexampled capital, boldly marching not for economic conquest only, but for political power. For the first time really in our politics, money is taking the field as an organized power. The question will arise in your day, which shall rule, wealth or man? Which shall lead, money or intellect? Who shall fill public stations, education and patriotic free men, or the feudal serfs of corporate capital? We know what the result can be under that outrageous recent U.S. Supreme Court decision, which has allowed any corporation in America to spend whatever they damn please to impact the campaign, and to do it anonymously so that you never know who's behind it. One corporation in one day dropped $600,000 into the Senate race against Patty Murray in the state of Washington. That's what we're up against. And we are never going to be able to beat them with money. The only thing we can beat them with is your legs, your mouth, your hands, and your heart. And we got to have all of them to win this next election. And for all of this Republican bull gravy that they've already got the next election won, I want to tell you one more story. A fellow by the name of Gaylord Nelson was a lawyer. You bet. He was a lawyer in Madison, worked at the Tenney Building, and in 1948 he was running for the state senate against Fred Risser's father, by the way. He was running for the state senate, and nobody thought Gaylord could win. But it was 1948. Harry Truman pulled the upset of the century, and so the next morning, Gaylord had been elected, and he walked over to the Tenney Building and got into the elevator to go up to the floor where his office was located, and there were a bunch of other lawyers in the elevator. And the elevator operator said, "Gaylord, congratulations. How's it feel to be a state senator?" Gaylord said, "Terrific." And then the elevator operator said, "Do you know why Harry Truman won the election yesterday?" Gaylord said, "No, I don't." He said, "Well, it's simple. They acted like they'd already been elected for so damn long, the country thought it was time for a change." So, the Republicans have already put this one in the bank. They think they own it. They think they've got it. The public does not like that kind of anticipatory arrogance. And so I just urge you, get out, work, address those envelopes, make those phone calls, talk to your neighbors. We can turn this election around. We can keep progressive forces in control of the Congress. And when we do that, then we can march to try to move and to change the idiotic Senate rules that have allowed Mitch McConnell for the last 2 years to frustrate the intent of the founding fathers, and to use and misuse those rules in order to give to the minority the ability to block the agenda of the majority. That ain't supposed to happen in a democracy, and we can't stop that without your help and without a democratic victory. So thanks for being here. Thanks for fighting for the cause. Thanks very much.